But what is all of this? She gazed into the distance, her chin in her hands. A golden dream that will never come true. She was overcome by a strange melancholy, a wistfulness that I had never seen in her before. And why should it not be feasible, I began? Because slavery does not exist anymore. This is a discussion between Wanda and Severin from the Venus in Furs, from Sacher Masoch, talking about the power exchange. Does it exist, yes or no? Or is BDSM just based on everything that has priorly discussed between dominance and submissive? And actually, BDSM is just theater. And nothing is for real. Because in the end, the submissive is still in control about everything that will happen to him or her. And during the session, they can also use that famous stop word. Whenever it is too much to take, they can just stop the action. So, is BDSM real? Or is it all just fiction? Welcome to my new podcast about the role of the submissive. Welcome to the House of Athena, the podcast where Mrs. Athena herself teaches you everything she knows about pleasures and seduction. And of course, she will get your kink life to the next level. Of course, always remember to play it safe and to take care about each other. Today we will talk about how to get acquainted with the role of the submissive. I had very particular questions on my social media about this topic. So I took the time to make a podcast, and at the end of the podcast I will make a tiny selection of a few questions to answer, because other questions will be covered in the first section of this podcast. It's been a while ever since I launched a new episode, as I've been working very hard on a new project that will enable you to set up your own BDSM game in a playful way. That is why I am designing a game of cards, accompanied by its book. The podcast will be very useful as an extension to the game. Now, let's analyze the submissive. For this episode, we will briefly analyze what the submissive, the bottom, the slave, the masochist, whatever you want to call it, is searching for. I can already tell you that pain is the least of their concerns. What they might be looking for is a little bit more spiritual, psychological, or just, sexual. We will also settle the power exchange between the sadist and the masochist thanks to some groundbreaking literature. Of course, stop words and prior consent will be mentioned. Then I will answer a few questions I selected from my social media. So, here we go. And I will start with some literature, history. Let's start with an emblematic book that all dominants should have at least tried to read, in my opinion. I said tried, because it's quite repetitive, as the author spent most of his life behind bars and had a lot of time, Yeah, he had some time to take pleasure in detailing the sufferings of its victims. So what is the origin of the word sadism or masochism? You find these words into the abbreviation BDSM. SM, sadomasochism, right? The origins go back to literature. So sadism refers to the author of books that were considered talking about sadistic actions upon certain persons. De Sade is the author, Le Marquis de Sade, sadism. On the other hand, we talk about masochism. Why? Because Leopold von Sacher-Masoch, masochism, as you can see, wrote a book called Venus in Furs, about masochism, so taking pleasure in pain. So the pleasure also comes from the masochist. Venus in Furs, of course, is also a book from the Velvet Underground, and it is based upon that book, Venus in Furs. It's a song, I'm sorry. It's a song called Venus in Furs from the Velvet Underground, and it is based upon the book indeed. Let's go a little bit briefly into these both authors' œuvres. So in short, Justine from de Sade, in French, Justine ou les malheurs de la vertu. I love to pronounce it a little bit in French. It gives a nice, luxurious, beautiful sound, isn't it? So this Justine, it is a quite long story about a poor girl who continuously falls into the hands of sadistic monks, bankers, criminals, all of them being sadistic and interested in getting sexual pleasure from that poor victim. She actually never consents to any of this, so she's not taking pleasure. But the sadists in that story, so the monks, the bankers, they really take their pleasure. You can read the book if you want to get more details, and I can tell you the Sade, as I already told you, is taking a lot of pleasure in giving you all the details possible. For example, there is that scene in which monks choose a victim between the nuns that are available, and they force them to stand by their bedside at night, in case maybe they would need some sexual pleasure in the middle of the night. And, well, when they find out, maybe the nun dares to fall asleep, a harsh punishment will follow, and they take pleasure in that, right? Now, The Venus in Furs is a novel about a European nobleman who wants to be enslaved by a cruel, powerful woman. You will find out in the book whether he finds its Venus in Furs or not, but of course he finds her. Now, in my opinion, okay, the submissive role is a little bit more enigmatic. It embodies something a little bit more passive. It is a passive role, yeah. He is a receptor of what the master is commanding. And he also receives a lot of psychological and physical stimulating actions from that dominance. So that can be anything. It can be humiliating acts. It can be a command of doing something. It can be certain acts such as whipping. Everything the submissive goes through in the session, and this is important, is the result of expressive consent. Without consent, you're not playing a legal game. This is the very start of any sexual interaction. The fun starts where there is consent. So again, in that book, Justine from de Sade, there has never been any consent, so we cannot talk about a BDSM game, what we know today, but we can talk about sadism, of course, because the sadist is taking pleasure in the book. But in the Venus of Furs, there is question of expressive consent. Still, Sacher-Masoch brings to light some kind of contradiction you will find in the sadomasochistic couple power exchange, okay? Actually, the slave pretends in the game not to want what he actually wants the dominant to do with him. So, before the session, the slave might ask the dominant, "Can you please whip me? In a degree that I can still enjoy it, and I will show it through certain signs while I am moaning, or until the moment that I will say a certain stop word." Well, you see, there is some prior consent that has been given to the action of whipping. That is very important. So, once the game is starting, it might be that that slave is doing as if the whipping is unsustainable, he can't take it anymore, but actually that's what he asked the dominant to do, isn't it? Is it some kind of theater? Well, this is some kind of topic and fertile ground for philosophical discussion around power exchange in BDSM. Now, it seems that the dominant is the one in charge, isn't it? But in the end, it is the slave who decides. So in the book Venus of Furs from Sacher Masoch, when Severin, so the slave, finally convinces Wanda, the dominatrix, to become her slave, Wanda starts to see that this is only a fictive situation, just as I just described to you. And she sees that it is impossible in a Western society to hand over property over your own person. They have this discussion about going to a country where it would be legal to hand over property over your own person, but they will finally decide to go to Italy. So in any way, she will resolve the question herself by saying, what is the point of having a slave in a country where slavery is a common practice? If we live in a cultivated country, then you will belong to me, not by law, right? Or power, but purely on account of my beauty and of my whole being. This idea is most exciting, she says. Wanda actually discovers true power in the fact that Severin is voluntarily submitting himself to her beauty and power, and that it is not prescribed by some kind of act or law, but he, from his entire being, desires to submit to something that he considers greater than himself. That is where I will start to answer the question of what a submissive is finally searching for. And I don't want to make it too long because there are so many reasons. So I want to go deeper into something very specific. So, in my opinion, because this is my opinion, we live in a secular society where religion is not really part of our lives anymore, or in our Western society at least. And people turn themselves to alternative spiritual practices to search for existential meaning. The search for a deeper connection with ourselves or the other, for instance, our partners, can have a sexual-based approach. BDSM has a fertile ground to create meaning and even further engage yourself in a metaphysical experience. Through a plethora of rituals, aesthetics, practices, symbols, name it, BDSM is an extraordinary tool to find extreme emotions, a deeper connection with yourself and the other. Even it is possible to do some psychological compartmentalization of trauma, or to do some mindfulness. Again, it is connection with yourself, to search in yourself what really matters, what you really feel, what you feel connected to, what you praise, what you find beautiful. For me, the spiritual search in BDSM is the strongest, and it is connected with all the other benefits a masochist can find through the practice. Pain, for example, is not what the submissive is really searching for, okay? But pain is a way to transcend out of your body. Just as religion can be. You know, sometimes you see that image of monks inflicting themselves pain because they didn't do something right. It is almost the same with BDSM. So you want to transcend out of your body. It's a way to experience something greater and to face the pain as a challenge to your own existence. On the other hand, pain can make you feel more connected and grounded to yourself or to a belief system you created through BDSM, for example. Whipping can be a punishment for something you didn't do or you did wrong, or being not chaste, for example. Pain is only a tool to express yourself spiritually and to connect yourself with the sadist who is inflicting the pain. You see, it is not what you really are searching for as a masochist. Now, do you know what you are searching for in BDSM other than just the sexual thrill? Just tell me. Why are you attracted to the game? Stand still and try to reflect on what just has been discussed. I could also tell you, simple sexual reasons why people would turn themselves to BDSM. It's the pleasure of tease, the beauty of a femme fatale teasing you, the pleasure of anticipation or fetishes, unusual sexual preferences for latex, for example. And last but not least, by sexualizing a psychological trauma, it can enable somebody to give it a little compartment in the mind where it finds some peace. That doesn't mean that I will advise anybody with a trauma to try out BDSM. No, you have to imagine that BDSM is something interesting for yourself before you try it, okay? It has to be part of your fantasy. Or you might have never thought of it before and somebody introduces you a little bit out of the blue and you are willing to give it a try, and in the end you find it quite interesting. That's the two reasons why people get involved in BDSM, because at first it's part of their imagination, or they get to know somebody who is involving them with that practice. And for some persons, BDSM can be a way to distract yourself from psychological or even sometimes physical agony. You get the attention somewhere else and you give it also a place in your mind. So it only lives through the BDSM experience, and later in usual activities in life you will find that your trauma has less impact. There are a lot of articles about that subject. Quite interesting, by the way, how BDSM can create more mindfulness, more happiness, more lightness in life. This is also true for persons who have heavy weight, responsibility in life, and for the time of a game, they can completely let go and they give power to somebody else. That is true. But it is not the only reason, because sometimes when you talk with people, they only see one way out. Why do people want to get involved in BDSM? Is it because they are rich men and they are searching for a release from their power and their responsibility? And it's not only that, as I just explained to you. I believe that BDSM is connecting us with something bigger, with something we want to experience that is not part of our lives anymore, like religion, when people used to believe in something. When some slave is worshipping a goddess, worship is part of also religion. When you worship a god, when you admire a god, when you submit yourself completely to whatever they will ask yourself, it is so comparable. And again, BDSM is such fertile ground for spiritual answers, because it's symbolism, the aesthetics, the rituals. So this is the first part of my podcast, and my approach to BDSM might look a little bit unusual, because I'm going in depth to the core of what is very important. We are not on earth just to have sex, right? There is a meaning in everything. And that is what I believe. So I try to explain things from another perspective than whatever you might already know. Now, as you see, the submissive still stays in charge, but it is very important to act as if BDSM, the whole play, is real. And that is where my podcast about the dominant is so interesting, because the dominant must really act as if the submissive is in charge, and there was no limit to his power, but actually he knows exactly what his limits are. And the submissive can let go into that power of the dominant, because he knows that everything that will happen in the session is under complete control, because of the prior consent he gave, and also because he has access to that very famous stop word, which is enabling the slave to stop the session whenever he wants to, because it's going too far, or he can't take it anymore, or maybe his mind is slaying somewhere else and he just cannot let go in the session. On the other hand, you see that there are a plethora of reasons why somebody might get involved into BDSM, and it is much deeper than just the sexual side, okay? Because why would somebody get involved in something so complex as BDSM? That requires quite a lot of research, and actually they are just searching for some sexual thrill, isn't it? So now we are going to dive a little bit deeper into the questions I received on my social media. So for the second part of this podcast, we will go a little bit deeper into the questions I received. So take a time to breathe this down and listen. Now my first question comes from Jack, who says, I like to dominate my girl, but she's not very reactive. And that makes it so difficult to find appreciation in dominating her. So Jack, my advice to you is, first of all, talk with her before the session or after the session. Please have a talk with your girl and tell her, like, I like you to express yourself a little bit more. Tell me what you like. Tell me when you appreciate something, by moaning, for example, or by looking very intensely into my eyes, because of course there is also nonverbal communication. I know exactly what you are talking about when you are asking that question, because sometimes I also have slaves that are not very expressive. I most of the time try to talk with them after the session, because that is not something I really appreciate. I like when somebody is intensely into the session and giving me clues on whether they like something or whether they are enjoying my way of doing sadistic things or playing with their mind. Sometimes we can also have a joke in the middle of a session, and that makes it already quite fun to see that there is interaction between two people who are communicating emotions and very intense playtime together. So, first of all, talk. Secondly, most of the time, when somebody is not very expressive towards me, I try to make an interpretation of it. What is that person trying to communicate or not trying to communicate? First of all, they might not be at ease during the session, not at ease with themselves. Well, the first role of the submissive is, of course, to give expressive consent, which I already talked, but secondly is to let go. So maybe the fact that that person is a bit stiff, not very comfortable, and not very expressive might be because they are not comfortable with themselves, and in letting go, maybe they are judging themselves too much. And the role of the dominant is to tell them, like, look, I am the one in control, and you have to let go. If you're not capable of letting go, then I will go a little step further and I will blindfold you, because when you take away the senses of somebody, like blindfolding somebody, that makes them, you give them capacity to do more introspective work, so to look deeper into them and to be more connected with what they are feeling or what they are going through from an emotional point of view. So that could be also something to try. So I hope this helps. Now let's go into the second question I received. So, okay, I had many questions, the same questions. So how can I convince my partner to try and dominate me? So I already made a podcast on how to embody the role of the dominant. Okay. So if you want to be a submissive and you like your partner, your life partner, or a friend to dominate you, first of all, you need to trust that person, okay? Because what you're going to tell them is of the order of your fantasies, your secret garden, so you don't give away those secrets for nothing. So you will need to sit down with that person and say like, okay, I think that you might be the right person to dominate me because I see that and that skill in you. And if you would accept to do so, I'd like you to do this, this, and that with me. Be very concrete in the actions you expect from that person. When you explain what you want that person to do on you, please don't make it sound as a scary thing. Try to explain from a psychological point of view what you are searching for. Why do you want somebody to attach you? How do you want that person to do it? Would you maybe like to go to a workshop together because maybe that person is quite scared, like, okay, what's going to happen? I need those skills. I don't have them. So maybe that's why they refuse. Also try to see why they are refusing. What is the reason behind it? Maybe it's a psychological reason. So you cannot force somebody to dominate you, okay? Maybe there's a real reason that person doesn't want to go that far with you. Also try to say why that person would gain or what that person would gain in dominating you. So maybe from a sexual perspective, you would gain this or that and you will have pleasure while I'm doing this to you. That is very important. Don't only talk about what you would gain from it. Also say like, okay, this is something you would gain out of it. It is almost like making a contract, like it's going both sides, right? So that is my advice to you. Let me go into the third question. Okay, so how do I, as a professional dominatrix, guide a complete newbie? Not all newbies are welcome with me because I'm already advanced and sometimes I want to go a little bit further in my sessions. So complete newbies. Okay. Actually, I'm going to tell you that it is up to the complete newbie to guide the dominant, because the dominance needs to know exactly what you're into from a psychological perspective, from a spiritual perspective, and also from a physical perspective. What are you searching for? Make sure to list that up, to express yourself clearly about what you want. What is it you're searching for? And when you're expressing that towards a dominant, that dominant might be interested, yes or no, because also a dominant has to agree upon what is going to happen in the session. Sometimes it happens that I refuse clients in more refusals than acceptances, to be honest. But if you are a complete newbie, make yourself interesting. also search for a dominant that is willing to accept you, because my website, for example, is explaining what type of sessions I am doing, what I'm specialized in. So you have to search for somebody who is willing to do that with you. So that is my complete, advice to you also, if you're a complete newbie. Once you discover that somebody is accepting you as a submissive, you respect that person completely. Whatever their rules are, you are submitting yourself to those rules, while they are accepting you as a slave, as a new slave. That is an honor, to be accepted as a slave by a dominant. That person is going to put a lot of energy into you. So the fourth question is, in what position should a slave be in front of his mistress or master in the beginning of a session? For me, this is a very general question, but hey, I wrote it down, so I will answer that question. So I think it's a very general question, because every master or mistress is deciding in what kind of position their slave is going to be in the beginning of a session. But it also might be that they are not expecting you to be in a certain position in the start of the session, because they're just overwhelming you and attaching you in a certain position, or restraining you, or pushing you into a cage. So everything might be possible. But what is important in this question is that, indeed, there might be a position in which you are expected to be. This can be part of discipline play. Or you can be asked to wear a chastity gauge before the session starts. Or for a certain amount of time, or you might be asked to bring something, or to wear something, or to not do something for a certain amount of time, like no orgasm during 1 week or more. Trust me, some can do much better. So that is my answer to that question. It's quite a general question, isn't it? Another question. What's something that is completely forbidden for a slave to do during the session? Oh dear, I know exactly why I wrote this down, and this is something I really don't like when slaves do. I don't like when slaves unhand over completely. Okay, a slave sometimes, I already talked about this contradiction in terminis, which is that the slave is actually still in charge because he agrees upon everything that is happening during the session. But that doesn't mean that you put the power of your master in question. Okay? Yeah, you can playfully do that, but not seriously. So what I don't like is, for example, a slave to just take my hand and guide me doing something. Not at all. Or when a slave says, mistress, now put the gag in my mouth, because that is exactly the moment when you will not get that gag in your mouth. I will be the one deciding about everything that is happening upon you, and you might be craving and asking for it, whatever you want, but in the end, I am the sadist, and I'm going to do whatever I want with you. So that is something I don't like what a slave is for a slave to do during the session. Is there something else that is completely forbidden for a slave to do during a session? Yeah, taking drugs, please. No thanks. I don't want drugged slaves. This is dangerous. This is not a game to go lie down with enhancing substances. Also, something is, it's not that it is completely forbidden, but please, slaves, express yourself emotionally. We already talked about this. This is very important for your dominant. Your dominant might have a lot of fun just seeing your reactions and your emotions. And how you struggle in certain positions also. Please don't hold yourself, okay? And sometimes I also like when a slave is a little bit naughty, when they are struggling a little bit against the will of the dominant. Now, another question, okay? I would really like to try switching. How can my sub turn into a dom? Okay, this is a little bit, like the question about how can I convince my girlfriend to try and dominate me. So this is something that is priorly discussed. With communication, we can achieve a lot, So let me go to the next question. I've always been submissive, but I'd like to try the other side. Is it possible? So, guy, yes, it is possible. This is called switching, when you exchange power positions, but still you have to discuss this with your partner, okay? This is the first thing. The second thing is that most likely, as you've been a submissive, you know exactly what you go through as a submissive, that you are aware of your emotional, physical, psychological, spiritual state when you are a submissive, and that you are internally attentive. You know exactly what a submissive is feeling. That means that you can probably, when you try the other side, attach the right commands to whatever you think a submissive wants to feel, or you can bring the perfect stimulative actions on the right moment at the right time, so that you can achieve something great on your submissive, actually, as you will be the one in charge. So I think that is quite a nice question. You shall really try. You can be really successful, Okay. So Sebastian has another question. I have deep submissive feelings, but my partner doesn't want to try. So I'd like to try out a professional dominatrix. Do you think I should try, even though my partner doesn't agree with it? Okay, this is a very difficult question, and the morality and the outcome of that morality balance you will make for yourself is up to you, completely up to you. But let me guide you a little bit. So, from the perspective of this question, I can read that you already talked about it with your partner and she doesn't want to try it. So, first of all, try to ask yourself, do I really want to try with my partner? Is one. Or do I prefer to go with somebody else? Then the other question you have to ask yourself is, if I want to go and try this out with my partner, did I even did my best to make the communication work at the hardest of my own capacities? Because trying to engage something new in your couple, it might take some time, but also you need to do your best to put your best effort in telling your girlfriend, in this case, in telling her why she would gain to try out being a dominatrix. Maybe tell her what it would feel like and how beautiful she would be in an amazing letter that you will buy for her, or shoes, or whatever your fantasy is about, because of course I cannot read it in your question. So try at your utterly most best to convince her, okay? Try the best arguments that there are. What does she has to gain from it? What are you searching for as a submissive? So this is very important. Go for that communication. Dive deeper into it if you really want to go with your girlfriend. Secondly, if you don't want to go with your girlfriend, okay, maybe you don't want to do your best for the communication, but you wanted to give her a chance. Are you ready to go for a lie? Are you ready to go that path of hiding for your girlfriend, whatever comes next? Or do you just want to impose your will, like, okay, look, you don't want to go for it, but this is very important, and I only live once, so I want to try this, and let's talk about it. Maybe there are some things you don't want me to do or try, and we will be able to work it out. Or maybe you just want to go that road and you're capable of living with that lie. You have to make that balance just for yourself. On the other hand, I still believe that sometimes it's difficult to just go full in on honesty in your couple. Okay, some people are just not open, unwilling to accept that their partner are into complex BDSM fantasies. So you don't want to go into exhausting discussions on whether yes or no, this is right or wrong. And you don't want to destroy your own fantasies by giving it all up to somebody who might destroy it or try to criticize it. So I understand it. Then something else I think is that you cannot just... I think that if you love somebody, okay, you will not quit that person because you believe that their fantasies are utterly weird. So again, it is a balance you have to make for yourself. Do you want to walk that quest to BDSM all alone, or do you still need a trusting partner at your side? Whatever that role of the partner might be, your partner might be the one who plays the opposite role, or your partner might be the one who is supporting you, or your partner might be just the one who knows about what is happening when you're outdoors. And it is always a trusting person who might be listening to your adventures. Or you're just going that path alone, as I suggested priorly. So, up to you. On the other hand, sometimes it is difficult for, one partner to admit that they want to go to a professional because they already know the standpoint of their partner, or maybe they don't want to be confronted with the standpoint of their partner or opinion of their partner about BDSM preferences. They might try to ridicule or just not understand it and see you possibly from a different daylight from that point on that they know about your preferences. So I understand that there are reasons in a couple you might not try to go the honesty way and try to hide it. Okay, so let's go to the final question, I think. Okay, what do you personally look for in a submissive? Oh, wow. This is very, very important, and this will be okay for every dom out there. First of all, honesty and respect, and that is exactly where the game starts. Secondly, reactivity, okay? This is something I already told before, is that a slave without emotions who's just standing there like an object, that is not for me. I want to interact with a human being, seeing your emotions, seeing how you move. I want to gain something out of it as a sadist. From the inside out, I want to see exactly how you feel or how I make you feel. That is the core of the game for me, to see how you feel towards what I'm doing to you. So third, I also want from slaves, okay, that person has done some research towards me. They know my standards and my practices. That means he's been following me, for example, on social media, reading my website carefully, writing an email in the format I desire and prescribe. They please me always with a prior gift, and I like when clients are generous in their own specific way, okay? It is not a question about money or something. It's more like, okay, you respect me and you know what I'm made of. I am not a standard dominatrix, okay? You are almost like a cat laying down a gift on a mat before I let you into my house. So it can be lipstick, some specialty from some food specialty from your country. And I'm quite lucky because I have a lot of French slaves and I love French food. Thank you for those who are bringing me nice gifts. By the way, I really appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. It makes me feel special. So, as I told you, it is no findom, okay? This is more like an act of a submissive gentleman towards somebody, me, that inspires them. There's something else I like, is that when the session starts, I want the slave from the start to trust me. When somebody tells me what to do, or they are trying to force my hand or something during the session, well, I will do the complete opposite as what you ask me to. And I just challenge you, okay, this is the sadist in me, but trying to take the control over in the session is no-go for me. Of course, something I'm thinking of is the overall alchemy must sit right, okay? When I feel naturally good with somebody, you know, that feeling that you understand each other, you look into each other's eyes and you know exactly what's the next action's gonna be, because you can play upon those emotions or their physical reactions. I really love that, when I can just manipulate you to that point where I feel that I can crush you between my hands. I love it. And last but not least, of course, hygiene, please. Clean slaves. You know, when slaves are all what I told, they get 1,000-fold better than what they just give me. They deserve the beautiful, generous, and skilled domina I am in my own specific way. I really hope you enjoyed this podcast. And actually, I want to change the format of my Patreon, because I don't want to do this with the sexy pictures. Everybody's already doing it with the sexy pictures and stuff like that. I'm more into the research, okay? What's very important about what is happening in a session. How do you construct a game plan? How do the partners interact with each other? That is important for me. That is something I want to go deeper into. So let me just check the format I want to go further with, if I go further with these Patreons. And in any way, you can support me by sharing my podcast and following me on my social media, so you are tuned for the next episodes. Don't forget that if you have any suggestion for next podcast, you can still send me an email. And don't forget that, as a submissive, and again, I want to just make a little repeat about what I just said. Submissive is somebody who's still in control, okay? He agrees upon everything that is happening in the session. Secondly, you can convince somebody to try out some things in BDSM. You just need communication, and you also will have to make the balance between what will my partner gain out of it, what will I gain out of it, and maybe you can find a way out together by designing a game plan, okay? This is not just a one-way pleasure. It is with two persons together, and it is a very special quest if you can manage to do it together with your partner. Also, please, the submissives, slaves, let go, okay? Your role is to be internally attentive, to do some introspection, and to be aware of your own emotional state, your physical state, and your spiritual state. Enjoy the moment, please. And whenever you don't like it anymore, you still have the safe word. So trust your partner and still make it both very safe. Enjoy! Don't forget that if you have any suggestion for next podcast, you can still send me an email. And don't forget that, as a submissive, and Again, I want to just make a little repeat about what I just said. Submissive is somebody who's still in control, okay? He agrees upon everything that is happening in the session. Secondly, you can convince somebody to try out some things in BDSM. You just need communication, and you also will have to make the balance between what will my partner gain out of it, what will I gain out of it, and maybe you can find a way out together by designing a game plan. Okay, this is not just a one-way pleasure. It is with two persons together, and it is a very special quest if you can manage to do it together with your partner. Also, please, the submissives, slaves, let go, okay? Your role is to be internally attentive, to do some introspection, and to be aware of your own emotional state, your physical state, and your spiritual state. Enjoy the moment, please. And whenever you don't like it anymore, you still have the safe word. So trust your partner and still make it both very safe. Enjoy!